Welcome to Break the Rules with Dr. Lauren Lax, a podcast dedicated to quieting the noise in the health, food, and fitness world. Dr. Lauren is a leading nutritionist, therapist, and functional medicine practitioner on a mission to help others thrive in their own lives, mind, body, and soul. And now, your host, Dr. Lauren Lax.
Well, hello. Welcome to another edition of the Break the Rules podcast, where we talk about fighting the noise in the health, food, and fitness world. And today, I'm super stoked to have Kylene Terhune in the house. Yes, and she is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, autoimmune protocol coach, wife, mom, and foodie, who has had her own journey with cancer, overcoming cancer, as well as just gut healing in general, my favorite topic in the world. So today we're going to have a really great conversation about the gut health and cancer connection, as well as learn a little bit more about Kylene's integrative approach to cancer treatment overall. So Kylene, thanks so much for coming on the show. And if you could just give us a little bit of background about who you are and what got you doing the work you're doing in the world.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lauren. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks for having me. I love sharing my story. I think, because it can help other people. And really, I love what you're doing with this podcast, which is all about bringing awareness to how people can take control of their health. And so I really have a lot, I owe a lot, I feel like, to bloggers and podcasters, because years and years ago, that is where I started to get information that there was more out there than diet and exercise in the conventional sense of understanding. The only ways that you can intervene in your health is to exercise more or, diet more. And we know that doesn't work. So I've always kind of been interested on a mild level in health, but really my interest started in about 2015. We had changed our diets back in 2012. My family went gluten-free. We saw a lot of benefits from that across the board and continue to do so. And so I started kind of getting into this food can make an impact, natural food, whole foods. Once I went gluten-free, I started learning about, real food, not just doing regular Oreos to switching to gluten-free Oreos, which is where I started. And so podcasters and people like that really started kind of putting the seeds in my mind for the concept of holistic care and integrative care and that sort of thing. So in 2015, I had a physical breakdown, physical, mental, emotional, however you want to define it, where I spent about 2 weeks in a chronic panic attack state. I was crying all day, every day. I could not sleep. I had crazy insomnia. If I did get to sleep, I would wake up and I would just be so anxious. I would cry and I had intrusive thoughts. It was extremely exhausting, extremely scary. I didn't know what was going on with my body. So of course I went to my doctor, and this lasted, like I said, the really deep end of it was about 2 weeks. And I went to my doctor twice during that period. The first time I was like, man, if I could just get some like hardcore sleeping pills to knock me out. If you can get rest, you can feel better the next day, right? And life has a different perspective to it. And then the second time I was like, hey, this isn't working. What can you do? And she's like, well, I think you should be on an antidepressant. And I said, do you think maybe I should have my hormones tested? And she said, well, if you're still cycling, I don't really see a need for it. So that was really, discouraging, because I knew enough to ask the question, but she didn't really think it was necessary and really couldn't help me. So I left. I ultimately decided to follow my gut and get some hormone testing done anyway, which I'm so thankful that I did, because they were really, really messed up. I had, postmenopausal level progesterone, which that alone can totally make you feel crazy and hormonal and just, really imbalanced emotionally. So I was able to get support for that. And that was just this trigger of, fascination for me. I was like, how can I prevent this from ever happening again? How can I support my body? How can I learn more? I really want to know everything there is to know, right? And I became this consummate learner. And so then I became an FDN as part of my journey in healing my own gut and my hormones. And so ultimately I learned, that my hormones could be impacted by so many things, and it's probably a secondary issue, and I shouldn't put all my attention on that. And so I found out I had a lot of stuff going on in my gut. I worked on that. I continued to progress and to heal and see a lot of improvements. And then in 2019, in February, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin lymphoma. So that was, after working in the health field and working with clients at this point and being like super deep into, nutrition and lifestyle and all these different things, doing, quote unquote, everything right. It was a little bit of a shock to realize that I had a tumor in my neck. And so I kind of had to deal with that. I had to do a lot of research, had to come to a peace about what treatment I thought was going to be supportive and curative and, moving forward with that. And then I also had to understand that, this was something that had been developing, anywhere from 7 to 10 years prior to diagnosis. And that made me feel better a little bit because I had seen so much progress with my new lifestyle that I felt like, okay, this strength will help me get through treatment, and then it will help me stay in remission. So that's kind of the mentality I ended up taking with it. But yeah, that's a little bit of the condensed version there.
Yeah. Well, kind of going through treatment, I know you talk a lot about integrative care. Talk to us a little bit about your experience there, and kind of like we can have the holistic world that's like no chemotherapy or whatever dogmas there are. And then same thing on the other side, conventional care, like nutrition doesn't make a difference.
Yeah, it's really crazy. And what's interesting about integrative care is that really at this point, it's the patient's responsibility to advocate for themselves, to do your own research and to figure out what you want to incorporate, and then create a team that's going to support you through that and be open to all of this. And so being in, the functional medicine world and the health coaching world and that sort of thing, by the time I was diagnosed, I reached out and kind of asked, hey, is there such a thing as an integrative oncologist? Is there a functional oncologist? And I hadn't focused on cancer up to that point, of course. And of course there is. There are naturopaths that specialize in oncology, and there are functional medicine doctors that specialize in cancer treatment, that sort of thing. So I started doing a lot of research. And what I really wanted to find was, the efficacy of it. And I wanted to know that it would be really, if I was going to go a natural route, that it had the same percentage cure rate as the conventional medicine did. And so I reached out to a lot of facilities. I did a lot of research. I looked for testimonials, that sort of thing. And what I found was some women like myself that had similar diagnosis would manage it themselves with a natural diet lifestyle approach and be able to basically stop the progression of the disease. But it required a really, really intensive lifestyle. And if they started to veer away from that, one of them that I was watching or reading her testimonial and things, if she would veer away from that, it would start to spread again. So it was a really, really intense lifestyle for her. On the other hand, I had a very unusual cancer in that I think it's like less than 1% of cancer patients have Hodgkin's lymphoma. So it's a rare cancer in itself, but then it also has kind of a rare rate of response to conventional medicine. It's a 95% chance that you're going to treat it with chemotherapy and have a survival rate beyond 5 years. And so it's actually really good numbers when you're talking about cancer in the conventional world. So I had a decision to make. Do I feel comfortable with that, even though it's super, super scary and toxic? And I typically do everything I can in the health realm. And a couple of things that came into that were I got to stay home if I did conventional. I had to probably go to another state and stay there if I was going to do any sort of integrative care, because that's where the practitioners were primarily. And so there were just a lot of different things to consider. So what I ended up doing was sort of a blend, a little hybrid program, so to speak. I had a conventional oncologist here, so I could get my treatments here. And then I hired an integrative oncologist that could work with me over the phone. And so she was able to put me on supplements that protected my organs from the toxicity of the chemo without inhibiting its effect on the cancer. And then I would protect my heart and my lungs and my gut and things like that while I was going through treatment. And then I also did things like IV vitamin C therapy in between infusions and that sort of thing. So what I ended up doing was sort of a blend, which is a little different.
Yeah. And how has that kind of shaped your practice now? And I know something that you're working towards as far as the integration of helping people make those decisions that are really like to know that you need vitamin C infusions, et cetera, or IVs and things that people have to Google on their own perhaps to find those answers.
Yeah, and I mean, even being in the functional holistic lifestyle world, I had so many questions, and so this is not something that I think a lot of people are familiar with, as it even being an option. And if somebody has heard that there are some alternative treatments and they present that to a doctor that's not very open or maybe not very familiar with them, a lot of times they'll get shut down, even if they're asking for something as simple as to take some supplements. And so it does require having a team that works with you. But yeah, it is really incredibly supportive. And so what I'm trying to do now is bring awareness to people that are diagnosed with cancer that there is a way to have the best of both worlds. If you feel like chemo is the way to go, you can use a lot of other tools and modalities to support your body through the process. And what this does is allow the chemo to work while protecting your body and supporting your energy. But also, you got to think recovery. So if you're protecting your body through the process, then you're also going to be able to recover more quickly as well. And so a lot of people walk away, they might survive the treatment, but they walk away with lifelong side effects and a lot of discomfort, in their bodies, pain in their joints or their muscles or extreme fatigue or, crazy uncomfortable symptoms from the treatment itself. And so using an integrative approach can help you navigate getting through it and then recovering without all of those horrible side effects.
That's really encouraging to hear. And one of my favorite cancer stories, there was a guy that I met through nutrition school, just like I'm sure you met many, but he had metastasized brain cancer. And they just told him he wouldn't live maybe another 3 months. And he's definitely living and put that into remission just through also an integrative approach. And understanding the root causes too of cancer, let's kind of like talk a little bit about what you learned. You were doing all the things. You were eating right, you were exercising, fitness was part of your background. Talk a little bit about what you've discovered about being triggers for something like cancer and how it really can happen to anyone as well if some of these pieces are missing.
So I'm actually in a nutrition oncology course right now, a graduate certificate program. And so I'm learning all about how cancer develops. Like, what are the hallmarks of cancer? How does it happen? And there are some different theories about how it happens, whether it's genetic mutations or like the mitochondrial sort of metabolic approach to the disease. But what the connection between the two is, and I guess you could sort of ask, does it really matter? Obviously, scientists want to really discover the mechanism so that they can, appropriately create treatments against the right thing. But ultimately, it's sort of the big picture. Does it really matter, chicken or the egg? Because both of those are affected by environmental triggers. So things like carcinogens and smoke and stress and, chemicals and toxins and all of these different things. And so when I talk about this in my book too, when I look back at, I was diagnosed in 2019 and you go back 10 years, yes. Check off anything on the list that might contribute to inflammation in the body, that might contribute to, damage and, be associated with cancer development. I probably could check that off. I had a horrible diet. I had extreme emotional stress in my life. Interestingly enough, I was actually raised in a city like about 2 miles down the road from a nuclear power plant that had several leaks throughout its history. And there are quite a few people in that neighborhood, like right around the plant, that developed cancer. So I don't know if it's directly connected or not, but I lived there for 18 years. So kind of comes to the back of your mind. And I did all sorts of normal stuff like, wearing really heavy aluminum deodorants. I mean, there was just a lot of toxin burden on my body that I had no idea that I was contributing towards. And so there's probably quite a lot there because really in the end, your body can handle only a certain amount. And ultimately, when it tips over a little bit, that's when disease happens. So, you'll never know the initial trigger. You'll never know what that final drop in the bucket was. But when I look back, I mean, it just seems to make sense to me because there was quite a lot that quite a lot that I could combine when I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. Was there any testing that you did aside from the cancer testing that you did find, like microbiome or hormone, or I'm sure you did a lot of blood work?
Yeah, no, actually my blood work was pretty perfect. When we started thinking that this might be what's happening, I got a lot of blood work through a friend of mine who's a nutritionist, chiropractor, acupuncturist, and kind of in that world. And all my markers were fine. Nothing would make you think that I had cancer. It was really great blood work, which I think just says, that's how healthy I was going into this. And it kind of, encourages me a little bit that what I was doing was supportive to my body, and probably the initiation of the cancer was probably from a long time ago when I had a lot of those unhealthy habits. I had been working on my gut and my hormones for, let's see, if that was 2009, probably since 2015. So several years at that point, about 4 years or so, 3 or 4 years. And I had found a lot of stressors there. I had several parasites. I had H. pylori. I had a lot of dysbiosis, things like that. And so those are all things that I had addressed. So again, causative or correlative, you never really know. But yeah, there were quite a lot of things that I had worked on at that point.
Mm-hmm. I know that your experience has led you to also develop a program around the gut and getting gutsy. Talk a little bit about just some of the fundamentals that you've learned over the years because of how the microbiome is a gateway to health and in your cancer journey as well. What are some things that you learned personally through healing the gut and through your cancer? And then what are things we'll start there and then go.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what have I learned by working on the gut? That's the primary question. Man, what can you not support by working on the gut? I think that's probably one of the biggest things I've learned. And so it's really, really interesting because, when you're marketing your business, you're told to niche down, right? And so of course there's some commonalities between clients that come to me, bloating, constipation, acid reflux, fatigue. Those are some of the really, really common ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's so fascinating. It's kind of hard when you work on the gut because to really specifically niche and target any one individual, because it helps everything. I was on the phone the other day with a lady that was talking about her brain and not being able to finish sentences and not being able to think complete thoughts, and all these different issues, just basically a lot of brain fog and a lot of memory and just tons of brain issues. And I was just talking to her. I was like, your brain is highly correlated with your gut health. And it's where I focus. And I definitely think that's where you should focus right now. And so it's just a fascinating thing. And that's why I got so interested in it, because like I said, I started out with, I got to focus on my hormones. My hormones are crazy. But then I started to learn, well, you got to ask why. And when you ask why so many times and you get back to it, and inflammation is connected to all of these diseases, and you say, well, where does inflammation happen? Well, a lot of times it starts in the gut, whether that be from pathogens, parasites, bacteria, yeast, whatever, whether it be from stress. We know that stress has an inflammatory effect on our gut and causes a lot of different issues in the body, mental, emotional, or physical. And so there's just so many different things, external toxicities impact the gut. And then the gut communicates to the brain so much more than the brain communicates to the gut. It's where our neurotransmitters are regulated. And so if we're having mood issues or like I mentioned just a second ago, brain issues, and if, I realized how important pooping is. Oh my gosh, is that a topic of conversation? I'm sure you have a lot too, right?
Love
and
it.
just yeah, even just for toxicity levels, if something is marked in your body to come out of your body, it needs to come out, and otherwise you have the potential for it to basically create toxicity and recirculate things and cause hormone imbalances and just so many. Plus, you're going to feel like crap because you're not getting rid of the crap, but.
Yeah.
But it's just so important. And so what I've really learned is that's where I start. Now you can always dig deeper with people. So you have sort of the foundational stuff that you can work with them on, nutrition, and run some basic gut labs and food sensitivities and that sort of thing. And then, there's the people that are really responsive to that foundation. And then there are people that need to dig deeper. And so maybe then you look into, heavy metal toxicity, or maybe you do look into mold exposure testing. And and different things like that if they're not responding to those foundational things. But the reason I think the gut is so cool is because most people do respond to focusing on that because it impacts pretty much every other area of your body.
Right. So talking about, preaching to the choir here, foundational things, then I think you make it very easy for folks to understand what does healing the gut even mean, or you try to do that in your approach. What does that even mean? I think as practitioners, it's easier for us to say, like, just need to heal the gut, and people hear heal the gut. But what does that actually mean?
Oh, it's such a good question. So I try to keep it really simple and talk about the lining of the gut. So the epithelial cell lining is really important. And this is actually where it gets really overlapped with cancer patients. So we can talk about that in a second. But these are fast dividing cells that every 3 to 7 days, if it's not bombarded at a rate which it can't repair itself, every 3 to 7 days or so, you have a new gut lining, which is amazing. And it's really, really, really important because what it's doing is it is preventing undigested particles, toxins, chemicals, things that you don't want to get into your bloodstream from getting into your bloodstream. So sometimes that happens and that's okay. There's a little bit of damage. We have an amazing immune system that backs up the physical lining and it captures everything and it marks it and it flushes it out and all this kind of stuff and it protects the rest of your body. But if this is, being bombarded and there's a lot of inflammation that's happening and there's a lot of damage in the lining and it's at a rate that it can't repair itself, this is when you're going to have downstream problems. And so when I'm talking about healing gut, I'm primarily talking about protecting and repairing that gut lining, removing any stressors that might cause an issue with it, addressing any pathogens that might be causing problems there, and then making sure that we're restoring the microbiome, so the balance of the good and the bad bacteria, so that you have obviously more of the beneficial and any of the pathogenic are under control because of that.
And so let's talk about like just daily stressors beyond just like standard American diet. Most people listening to this are already like doing all the things like you were. What are some of the stressors on gut health that sometimes are easy to go undetected or overlooked?
I think a lot of people are aware of them, but I think that we might ignore them because we think that we do so many things that are healthy, it's going to counteract it. And so I really don't need to worry about it. So I'll give you an example. Hairspray was like one of the last things for me to give up because I was like, it's hairspray. Like, you can't find like a natural one that's as good, right?
Right.
So there's a lot of things like that. And it's true, we do need small amounts of inflammation or I guess you could say, exposure to different things. We can't have this total anti-inflammatory life because your body can go the opposite too. And there can be an issue with that. So you do need a little bit of a balance. But for most people living in the world today, it needs to be a focus on anti-inflammatory and reduction of toxins because otherwise it's just the levels are too high. So I think one thing that maybe people don't always think about is water. And that's a huge one because like we think about our food and we think about eating that every day and we know that there's food sensitivities and we know that there's allergies and we know that people respond to those, but then we'll forget about our water. And it's the same thing. We're drinking it all day, every day. And we just assume that our cities are purifying them. But then we forget that, we shouldn't be drinking a lot of chlorine. We shouldn't be drinking a lot of fluoride. They don't actually get rid of all the pathogens all the time. Sometimes there will be trace amounts of heavy metals or pharmaceuticals that are still in those systems. And depending on where you live, it's more or less clean. And so that's a really big one. And I loved and I could taste the difference when I switched to reverse osmosis. And we're actually doing something different in our new home. We're doing a structured water system for the entire house with a double unit underneath the kitchen sink. So the whole house will be pure. We're going to bathe in it, shower in it, everything, drink it. And then there's like extra under the sink just so it's like double purified. But in the current house I live in, we are doing reverse osmosis and I'm telling you, wow, you can tell the difference. So that's one. And then, beauty care products, nail polish, I think is one that people either don't know about or totally ignore for beauty's sake. And that's one where you're just putting a lot of chemicals right there. And just like anything you put on your skin, it's going to get absorbed into your system. So again, pick the things that you're not going to compromise on, but make sure those are really few and far between.
Yeah, lowering the load. It's all about the toxic, the load and the compound.
Yeah. And I have to say too, I think your mentality plays a huge part in that. If you are somebody that stresses out all the time or it just has sort of a negative outlook or just, is worried about all of these little details, that in itself is not going to help your immune system and it's not going to help your body heal. It's actually going to suppress your immune system, helping, contribute to the problem. And so it's really, really interesting because you'll see that people maybe aren't that healthy in terms of their habits, but they have the best personality and they're happy all the time. And their mentality, I think, really does play a big part in that. So that's another one I think that's really overlooked sometimes.
I know it's so easy to discount because it's just like, how could our stress levels in our mind impact our gut? So
Yep.
talk a little bit about too. So we talked about like kind of what to remove from stress of the gut. What do you put in? You talk about rebuilding the gut. What are like the good things beyond just, I need to eat my vegetables. Although 1 in 10 people actually eat the recommended number of vegetables, or they eat the same vegetables, just eating broccoli every day. It doesn't mean you eat a lot of vegetables.
Well, that's a huge one is variety for sure, because that's what the beneficial bacteria eat. So like a lot of people focus on the probiotic side of it, right? And they'll say, well, I need this probiotic or I need that probiotic. And you probably do, especially if you've been on a lot of antibiotics or you have a pathogen that you need to address, that sort of thing. But long term, if you're not also doing the prebiotics and whatever probiotics you're eating, whether it be yogurt or sauerkraut or pill or whatever, they may not, stick around. And so that is a problem. But when you're talking about bringing things in, it doesn't always have to be something in your mouth that you're bringing in. I like a lot of the lifestyle stuff, like grounding and getting sunshine and vitamin D and all of those sorts of things. I think it is talking about things that we don't value enough, or maybe we think are a little woo woo, or like for the sun, for example, has been so demonized that it's only going to damage you. And we really need to, what I call, practice safe sun, where I encourage people to, know what your limit is, because burning is never good. But up until that point, it's beneficial. And so we have to get that exposure. We cannot constantly be blocking it. I love walking barefoot outside whenever I can. If I can't do that, because in Ohio during the winter it's cold and nobody's gonna do that. So I have like a grounding blanket that we sleep on, and I can tell a big difference in that. I'm waking up earlier, being consistent on sleeping on that, and so that lowers inflammation, does all sorts of things. So I think it's not always just like, hey, there's a parasite and I need to get rid of that and bring in a probiotic. I think it's sort of your whole lifestyle and your whole mentality that contributes to it. Because again, those things play into stress. Did you get enough exercise? Did you get enough fresh air today? Did you connect with the earth? Are you having a good circadian rhythm? Are you getting super amazing sleep? And when you combine all of that, it all impacts each other and it's directly related.
How do you get folks to understand that, your clients? So I sometimes get clients that are just like, okay, but just give me the protocol and let's get the parasite out. And when we're trying to talk or work on maybe some lifestyle things, or recognize like the stressful, just like mentality of go, 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 or don't stop checklist, that can be driving the gut. And I speak from experience. That was like totally me before I realized how impactful the lifestyle pieces were.
Yeah. Well, I guess I do it in a couple different ways. I have an online program that my personal one-on-one clients will go through when we're not on the calls together. And so I do a lot of education around these different topics. So we're not just talking about the gut biology or whatever. So I go into one of my videos is like gut health 101. And so I talk about the gut lining and why that's important. And, we talk about food sensitivities and all sorts of different things. Because I really want a lot of people, if they're like me, they want to know the why behind it. So I try to teach them the why behind it. And then I do go into all of the lifestyle factors as well. And obviously it's stuff that I like to talk about. I also have a long-term relationship with my clients. So when they come to me initially, we commit to 6 months together, and we have calls about every 2 weeks. And so we're able to check in a lot and that sort of thing. And then I guess the third thing that would kind of help me in that area is really like sharing my personal experience with things. And I love to try things out myself, if it's reasonable, before recommending them to somebody else. And so then I can share, maybe a little bit of like, here's the science behind it. Like, this is actually what it does to your body. But oh, by the way, I've tried this and it really made me feel like this. And so maybe addressing a specific concern they're having, if it's, detox, and you're trying to convince them to do a sauna, you can share how important that is and how supportive it is. And you can walk them through your personal experience and, all the benefits that come from that sort of a commitment. So I guess a couple different angles, but I guess it would depend on the person too.
Yeah, support. No, I like how you talk about the why behind it and helping individuals also learn that knowledge is power. I think when we take it in our own hands, when we're the self-learners or learning, providing that experience. Well, Kylene, where can people find out more about you and the amazing work you're doing in the world? And I know you have a book as well.
Yes. So I do work with clients one-on-one in my gut health practice. And so people can find me on Facebook. My free Facebook page is Gut Love with Kylene. And I also have a supportive community for cancer patients called Healthy Through Hodgkins, and that's on Instagram and Facebook as well. And I'm not currently working with cancer patients. That may come sometime in the future. But right now what I'm doing is just building a platform of encouragement, hope, information, because I really realize there are support communities on Facebook, but when I got diagnosed, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't want this in my feed, because people are posting all these symptoms and all these scary side effects. And I didn't want it to get into my head that that's what would happen to me. I needed to maintain a really positive mentality. And so what I'm trying to do is share information, but in a very positive way. You have charge over the team that you create. You can hire or you can fire your physician if you don't get along with them. And that's a really important relationship. And here are some things maybe to consider, before, during, or after treatment. And so a lot of that is stuff that I go through in my book, Healthy Through Hodgkins. I talk about physical and emotional constipation and how important it is to address both and all those sorts of things. So yeah, you can find me on Facebook or Instagram. My personal is Kylene_Terhune_FDN or Healthy Through Hodgkins as well.
Amazing. I'll definitely be putting links in show notes, and just thanks so much, Gut Sister in Crime, for coming on the show. Break some rules.
Thank you so much, Lauren.